Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. What I'd love to do today on this absolutely spectacular Sydney spring morning is to go through yet another book, and the book that I've selected for today's episode is a very interesting one, especially for those of us who are parents or grandparents. The title of today's book is The Coddling of the American Mind, and how good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. This book was authored by a dual authorship of Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. It doesn't come as a surprise that over the past decade or two we're starting to notice a change and a shift in students and how they think, how they behave, how they interact. And this book touches on that subject. Students were once bright and eager, but many seemed hesitant to debate ideas in class, shutting down at the slightest hint of disagreement or discomfort. Some students even ask these days for a safe space in order to avoid discussing controversial topics altogether. So confused and curious, we look at this book, The Coddling of the American Mind, how good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. And this book is an absolute eye-opener, to say the least. It's a blending of psychology, sociology, and cultural analysis, where the author argues that well-meaning efforts to protect young people are absolutely fostering a thing called fragility and stifling intellectual growth. And this gives us an opportunity to look at this in more depth today, because what we need the tools to foster resilience in classrooms and beyond, and to understand things a little bit better. Let me just hold on over here before I get washed into the water by the wake of these ferries. So let's go through this book. Let's have a look. Let's try and identify some skills, some knowledge, some wisdom, and things that we can use that can give us a sense of potential power and help us grow, develop, and become better role models, better parents, and to understand what's going on in this world around us, so that we are in a position to at least guide the youth and the future leaders that we have in our families and around us. So the first key message to come from this author is a bold one, and the author here reminds us that overprotection harms resilience. These authors, Haidt and Lukianoff, explain that shielding young people from discomfort, like shielding them from challenging ideas or failure, actually works against them because it weakens their ability to cope with life's invariable setbacks. Just as our muscles grow through stress, emotional and intellectual resilience develops by facing difficulties, not by avoiding them. So what we need to do is we need to encourage our children and those around us to engage with the difficult topics, the tough things around us, and to frame discomfort as a growth opportunity. The next thing to come from this book, from these authors, is that one needs to challenge the three great untruths. And the authors identify three harmful, this is really important, three harmful beliefs that are shaping our modern culture. And these three beliefs are as follows. What doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Always trust your feelings. And life is a battle between good and evil people. These untruths fuel a thing called fragility. It makes us weaker. These belief systems, once adopted, actually work against the people who adopt them because they fuel a thing called fragility. They also fuel emotional reasoning and tribalism. And it's important to note that by teaching students to question these ideas and seek evidence over feelings, you get to a point where you can help them approach debates with a thing called curiosity rather than being bogged down and terrified by fear. The next point that the authors make here is another powerful point, that the concept of safe spaces can actually backfire. While intended to protect, excessive safetyism, like trigger warnings or speech restrictions, can actually work in the opposite effect by amplifying and magnifying anxiety and discouraging open dialogue. And this book argues that exposure to diverse ideas, even offensive ones, builds intellectual strength. And the call to action for teachers is to redesign their class discussions to balance respect with open inquiry, creating a space where students feel safe to disagree without shutting down and going into their shells. We need to encourage cognitive behavioural thinking, and the authors here draw on cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT, to show how distorted thinking like catastrophizing, such as catastrophizing or black and white reasoning, actually fuels fragility, teaching children and students to challenge negative thought patterns, like assuming a critique means failure. Help them handle feedback constructively and boost their confidence in the classroom. And the last key point to come from this book is where we need to foster a culture of anti-fragility is the key message coming from these authors. This book advocates for anti-fragility, where challenges make you stronger. You need to understand that you get stronger by being challenged, and it doesn't make you weaker, contrary to popular belief. This means embracing calculated risks like public speaking or debating opposing views in order to grow. And what teachers need to try and do is to incorporate low-stake debates in their classes, rewarding effort over perfection, which helps students build confidence and embrace any intellectual risk-taking. So in summary, in conclusion, The Coddling of the American Mind is a compelling, evidence-based wake-up call that exposes how overprotective parenting, education, and cultural trends are undermining resilience and critical thinking. Haidt and Lukianoff's blend of research, anecdotes, and practical solutions makes it a vital read for educators, parents, and anyone concerned about preparing young people for a complex world that awaits them ahead. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club, and I look forward to coming to you again from another place and with another message of empowerment. Bye for now.